Great.
Right.
Okay, call this meeting to order of the City of San Clemente Design Review Subcommittee for Wednesday, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. 3 p.m. in the Community Development Department. Present is the Vice Chair, myself, Cameron Cosgrove, and member Bart Crandall, and at the moment absent is our chairperson, Steve Camp. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'll do the preliminary, and then we'll turn it over to Steve when he gets here. But for everybody's just general knowledge, the purpose of the subcommittee is to provide direction, ideas, insight, concerns, options to the applicant in order to they best comply with our city guidelines. This subcommittee is not an approving body. We only make recommendations to the Planning Commission and the Zoning Administrator regarding the project's compliance with city design guidelines. The city has a lot of guidelines. We're only doing the design ones today, so keep that in mind. If you're wondering, well, why are you talking about environmental stuff? Out of scope, just design. So this is meant to be an opportunity to provide feedback and input, and then that's pretty much the day. We do welcome comments from the public, so when we get around to that, we'll obviously invite anyone that wants to make a comment to make a comment. Just ask that you kind of keep it concise and brief. And I think that's it. Bart, would you add anything to that? We good with that?
Well, that's good, and
Okay.
we'll be passing on approving the minutes since
Yeah, so we'll just
isn't here.
we'll
and
skip over item 1, and that'll take us to item 2, which is an architectural review of a pre-application, which is a mixed-use project at 115 North El Camino Real, otherwise more affectionately known as the Sit and Sleep location. And so this is a request for preliminary review. It is not an actual building application. It's just, would you look at our design, make comments on it? So that's what we're going to do. And I will turn it over to John. Are you going to do the overview?
Yes.
Fantastic. So the way it will work is our professional staff who's reviewed the plan will review that overview with us. Then we'll have some general questions back and forth between Bart and myself, and then we'll open up for some comments if people want to make them, brief ones, and then we'll provide the feedback. So that's the structure. You want to
All
go
right.
ahead? That'd be great.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So as stated, this is a preliminary review application for the San Clemente mixed use project. Just to give you some brief background on this, it was originally submitted in 2011 and then subsequently withdrawn in 2012. The focus of the review of that project at that time and some of the critical components that were analyzed were potential impacts to the Oscar Easley building, which is the historic resource to the south of the property. The applicant is utilizing these same plans from the final design review subcommittee meeting from 2012 to obtain feedback from the design review subcommittee. And previously, at the end of last year, staff provided feedback just in terms of the project and its compliance with and identifying of some of the regulations as well as the city's policies that have changed with the general plan that was approved.
And John, if I could interrupt just for the record, Chair Camp has entered the meeting. Thank you. Continue.
Absolutely. There, as part of the project that was before the design review subcommittee back in 2012, it did include a historic resource report that analyzed the project as well as its potential impacts to the historic resources, and did identify that there were no significant impacts. However, they did propose some design modifications that could be included to improve the overall massing of the project. Those, just at a very high level, were offering up the ideas of increasing the upper floor setback from 15 to 20 feet, as well as reducing the third floor units or eliminating units F16 and TH1, which are the units immediately adjacent to the Oscar Easley building, as well as modification of setback planter on the upper third floor on the south elevation, as well as some considerations for moving some planters in the landscape or in the corridor area of the upper floor to some street-facing decks. So just to give you a brief background in terms of the project location's description, it is located in the mixed-use 3 architectural overlay as well as the central business district overlay for the city. We've identified here some of the immediately adjacent historic properties to that. The site is about half an acre at 21,897 square feet and is proposing 16 residential units. So as part of this would include a density bonus if the project does move forward. There's about 7,700 square feet of retail at the ground floor as part of this. And it is proposing 3 floors. So as part of the project, to move forward in compliance with the city standards today would require a conditional use permit for that 3rd floor and increased height up to 35 feet, which is subject to city council approval for lots with topographical conditions. The project does include 38 parking spaces for the residential and commercial. And as I said, it is adjacent to several historic resources in the city. So here I've just kind of, for some additional context, illustrating with a photo the topography of the site. As you can see, it's relatively flat, but it does have a sloping portion at the back of the lot that abuts Avenida de la Estrella. The grade change you're looking at is approximately 15 feet. So just to go over briefly the site plan with you, the ground floor is commercial along the North El Camino Real frontage with 2 courtyards that are proposed to address the design guidelines as well as some of the recommendations from the historic resource report. And then behind the building is the first level of commercial parking. On the upper first floor, or the first floor, is essentially reflective of the site plan that was just illustrated here with some dimensions of the courtyard areas. And then on the second floor is parking that's accessed off of Avenida de la Estrella, as well as the first level of the residential units along the North El Camino Real frontage. And then on the 3rd floor is residential units at the back of the building along the Estrella frontage, as well as the second level of the units along the North El Camino Real frontage. So the residential units range in size from 950 square feet to almost 1,600 square feet. Wow. So we have some renderings that were prepared, and this is all from the 2012 submittal. Just give some context in terms of the architectural design, as well as the incorporation of the courtyards and architectural elements for the project. So we've got several elevations just to move through here. Here we have just a straight elevation looking at the Oscar Easley building to the right, as well as the elevations here seeing the stepping back of the upper floors. And then just additional views from Estrella, as well as at the lower image would be viewing from the historic building, the Oscar Easley building here. And then just another 3D visual simulation from the Oscar Easley building looking north at the property. As you can see, the courtyard adjacent to the Oscar Easley building is approximately 32 feet deep and 30 feet wide to provide some offset, as well as these courtyards would be providing, if restaurants are incorporated, outdoor seating.
Are these new or are these from the original?
These are from the original, from the 2012. So as part of the 2012 submittal also included drive-by visual simulations, so we're going to go through those now just for a little bit better understanding of the project. So there's 3, they're very brief, and I'll go through those one at a time. Hopefully we can get into it. So this is heading south.
That's speed.
Can't go that fast.
You can't go that fast.
There's no traffic on the road here, as you can see today. It's a unique day.
Sunday morning before church. It was a green light.
I'm glad the green light made it in the visual simulation. And we've got 2 more. Bear with me here. Just heading northbound.
Jeez.
And then lastly, should be a view coming up Del Mar and then turning northbound. All right, so that concludes the visual simulations drive-by. So with that concludes staff's presentation. Again, this is a preliminary review requesting feedback from the design review subcommittee related to the design of the project and giving the applicant feedback in terms of guiding him for a future formal submittal. So that concludes the staff presentation. Staff and the applicant are available for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Does the applicant, would the applicant like to make a presentation? Hey, Dale.
Hi, how are you? Good to see you all again.
Seen you in about 20 years.
I know. Their presentation, covers a lot of the basics. One thing I wanted to point out was the 3 items that the last meeting we had came from a historical resource report that was an independent that was hired by the city to do. And there were 14 items. We did all but 3. And he commented on that and said that we had met those guidelines. The 3 we also commented on that one of them, it says that he said we should do, instead of 15 feet, we should do 20 feet setbacks. The code's 10 feet. And so we did 15, and in one section we're 19.6. And so, there's ways today in the feedback that we get from all you. I believe even the other 2 items meet code. And so he's just saying that it would be easier to stomach, for the wrong term to use. But we do meet code in all the codes. And so that's why we're here today to hear feedback. So thanks for having us.
Okay. Why don't we start with questions, and then who here is here to speak on this project? There's 2?
Over here.
There's a whole bunch over here.
Look like
Okay.
4 or 5.
So, do my compatriots have any questions of the staff or the applicant?
Yeah, John, did you have any comments that have not been incorporated into this yet? What we see here?
So what the comments that were prepared in the staff comment letter are the same plans that are in front of the design review subcommittee now. So the applicant has not incorporated any of those modifications at this time.
Okay. And could you elaborate on the 3 items that you chose to keep as is?
So the first item was the setback. Can you pull that up, please? No?
You want the rendering?
No,
the report
the items.
attachments.
Okay.
I think we can get to it.
I'm doing this for the public's benefit also.
Sure. So the first item had to do with increase from 15 feet setback to a 20-foot or greater. That was a recommendation that was by the historical consultant, and then DRC recommendations thought it was a good idea. And we have problems because of the number of units and what it does to the fire. And, they came back and said that we could reduce the size of our units, and to get a fire walk in sufficient, space there, or ask for variance to reduce the planters. I mean, because planting is, there's a certain percentage of the area that needs to have green space. So we didn't want to lose any units. We didn't want to cut back on the size of our units since we exceed the code as it is. The second item,
Do you remember which numbers they are in there?
one is the one I just talked about, and then the second one was to eliminate 2 units, and that's number 2. There again, we don't want to lose any units, and we are setting back at 16 feet and 19 feet. There are areas where at TH1 is one of the units, which is Townhouse 1, it's the front one on, and we pushed it back an additional 30 inches. And that, I guess, isn't enough, so. But there again, the code is 10, and we're already at 15 and 19.6. And then all the other of the 14 items, the comment is that the applicant has made the recommended design changes. Until you get to 14, and there's a stairwell at the back, which we really didn't understand that they wanted us to relocate that stairwell because there's an existing stairwell on the neighboring property, and we're side by side to it, and we don't see any massing really that does. So those are the 3 items that we didn't address out of the 14.
Okay, thank you. And then, John, you mentioned that the CUP exception is the 3rd story.
Correct.
And height.
Correct.
Okay.
Which is city council approval.
Right.
So this will go to city council regardless,
Yes.
ultimately.
It's my recollection that that's the direction they wanted to go, so that's the way design review looked at it, as 3-story. Because that was the process they were going to go through, so as we evaluated as 3-story.
Okay. Commissioner Fowler?
No questions at this time.
Okay, why don't we start with Larry?
Could I ask a question before my comment?
Oh, sure.
It goes to city council. The code says you can go up to 35. Did city council say you could go to 45, 50?
It'd be either a variance or, depending on what the applicant's considering in terms of the density bonus, concessions with
The
that.
answer is yes, 35 is not the limit.
If they consider a density bonus, but at this time we don't have that information from the applicant. They're considering options. So, and again, this would come back to a design review, and at least one design review meeting as well as planning commission, city council. So,
I have just a few brief comments.
Okay, why don't we start? And just before we start, everybody's aware that we like to keep your comments, concise. And if somebody's already made a certain comment, we appreciate if you don't repeat. Everything's going to be on record, so I think that'll be all right. Go ahead, Larry. Thank
Yeah,
you.
the Historical Society vehemently opposed this project 12 years ago, and it hasn't changed. I think everyone would like to see something nicer at 115 South, North El Camino Real, to replace that sit and sleep. But the project before you is not the answer. I think it would be a catastrophe. It's far too big, it's too tall, too wide, and too deep. It would visually completely overwhelm the entire surrounding neighborhood, which the design guidelines state it's not supposed to happen. Please look at page 99 of your agenda report. Hold that up. That shows the area of potential impact. The intersection of Avenida Del Mar and El Camino Real is the most important area of San Clemente's history. It's the historic epicenter of San Clemente. It's supposed to be this. That's the one. There are 8 historic properties. They lie within that area. The building that would be most impacted is the Easley Building, arguably the most important of all of the buildings. It is the beautiful, highly visible crown at the head of our most important historic street. Page 215. The Easley Building is not all that large. Could you put up page 215?
Yes, sir.
It's only 30 feet tall and 100 feet wide. It is modest yet elegant. The Olin project would have a roof line at 275 feet above sea level. That would be 15 feet above the Easley, which is at 260. And that does not count Olin's chimneys, which would add several additional feet. All of Olin's height would be visible from multiple vantage points along El Camino Real, and this is the one. Oh, okay. The rendering. So the Olin project is 220 feet wide, almost 4 times what the Easley has, and it does not have that much modulation in the facade, on either the facade on North El Camino Real or the secondary facade on Avenida de la Estrella. They do have 2 proposed courtyards. That helps, but there still needs to be a lot more modulation. If you look at Plaza Del Mar, where El Torito restaurant is, you look at that from the front facade on Avenida Del Mar, it looks like 3 separate buildings. It's got a big tower, it's got a triangular element, and another building. It looks like 3 separate buildings. That looks like one monster building. Page 218, please. The east facade along Avenida de la Estrella is also very problematic. That little tiny thing on the left, that's the historic resource. Our design guidelines say you're not supposed to outmass historic resource. That thing is probably 8 times the size of the historic building. I realize it's a secondary facade, but nevertheless, Avenida de la Estrella is heavily traveled. A lot of tourists, a lot of people, the church and the motel back along there. The depth of the Olin at 100 feet is not the biggest problem, but it would look much better if that front facade had some inset verandas on the second floor, like the Easley building has. Mr. Champa's excellent staff comments and corrections letter that's dated September 18th, that's your attachment 2, provides a good roadmap for the applicant to design a project that will better fit the requirements of San Clemente. Please also direct the applicant to incorporate all of the recommendations made by the historic consultant in 212, that's your attachment 3. Also another idea I'd like to throw out quickly, how about a full excavation? It's been done on numerous projects around town. If you did a full excavation, you could put your 50 cars down below. You know what I mean, Commissioner Crandall? Like the building across the street from San Clemente Art Supply. They spent 6 months and they went down 15 feet, so you could put a lot of cars down there. You wouldn't have to waste that valuable ground and second floor space for parking. So I look forward to seeing the applicant come back to DRFC with a project that will add to our downtown while still being respectful to our historic buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else do we have over on your side?
I just want to say I concur with everything Larry said, and in addition, I just want to emphasize that I take offense at the 3rd story. I think that it's just a bridge.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to echo what Larry said, and I'd also like to see that you have an updated historical resources consultation for today, because we're basing a lot of those changes on recommendations that were made 12 years ago.
Okay.
Echoing the group, in 2012, the Orange County Register issued an actual report on this project. And at that time, the Historical Society issued a position paper, which I'd like to incorporate by reference into your consideration. But more importantly, they quoted as saying that at that time, it's the most viewed building in the city, the soul of the downtown commercial area that sets the tone for the entire historic district. and traditionally it has always stood taller than others around it. It served as San Clemente's first bank, first chamber of commerce, and for a time in the 1930s as City Hall. So as the project is laid out, there is an unyielding massing that runs half a block that so overwhelms this historic resource that one cannot even differentiate its existence as the gateway. So I think there's just frankly not enough energy and insight and elegance put into its design relative to what is clearly one of our most treasured assets. And on that basis, I think it's frankly amateurish in sophistication compared to what it has to do, and consider its proximity and relevance next to that asset. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Sir, did you want to speak?
I'm going to echo what everyone else has said, because it is just way too large for considering what it's adjacent to in all scale.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to speak?
Well, I mean, I'm pro-business from the standpoint of I appreciate people investing in our community and wanting to do a project that improves upon the Sit and Sleep building, which I think everybody in this room will agree is not a historic asset that needs to be preserved. But the one next to it absolutely does, the Easley building. And so my feeling is that the historic recommendations that were in the report that you saw had some of those three items. I think all three of those items need to be incorporated. And if we saw something that incorporated those and included a third story, maybe that's a compromise that makes something that can make business sense as well as be an asset, something that we can embrace as a community.
Okay, Don?
How you doing?
Good.
Long time since 2012, when we went through the final iterations of the current general plan, and a lot of the numbers you see in here were debated and discussed extensively at that time. Huge public outreach on 2 and 3 stories downtown Del Mar, and so the limitations that are in the current ordinance are there very specifically, and the requirement to go to city council was put in there very specifically. And so I think the applicant should, I know where he's coming from, probably a resubmittal of 2012, but probably should reconsider it based on the height limitations that it posed in the current zoning ordinance and plan. Thank you.
Did you guys consider the change in the general plan since the last time you submitted?
We really haven't done that. We wanted to, come back and see, where I didn't expect the committee to change their opinions, but I wanted to know if the city was, in general, would change their opinions. We have compromises, we have ideas, but we think the project meets the 4 litmus test questions that the city council needs to look at. And, we're just basing that on the hard facts. Are there other compromises?
Okay, yeah, no, I was
this
just curious if you took
No.
that into consideration. Okay.
I'm not going to be as diplomatic as the other ones are here. If there was a poster child for bad development, this is the poster child for bad development. It's a monster. It's a monstrosity in the soul of our historic downtown. Something that you would see in Los Angeles and Los Angeles or West Hollywood, but not in San Clemente. We have Spanish Village by the Sea here. We have Henry Lenny design guidelines, which you have not done at all. This just does not fit into our city here at all. Now, we're not anti-development, and I know the developer last time said, well, before he fled San Clemente, that we are all anti-development. We're not anti-development. We're anti-bad development, and this is very bad development, quite frankly. For crying out loud, next door to you is a building that's on the National Register of Historic Places. Across the street are 2 historic buildings, one of which also is on the National Register of Historic Places. I was on the city council for 12 years. I was in the planning commission when this was proposed. And we went through a lot of iterations for 3 stories. And there's a 3-story down on South El Camino. And my interpretation at that time was slope. The slope had to go down so that from the back you could see 3 stories, but not from the front. You can only see 2 stories. That was my interpretation about the guidelines at that time. This just does not fit in with San Clemente at all. It needs drastic reduction in massing and size, to say the least. And quite frankly, there's going to be a great deal of opposition to this once again. So we can all work together to change it, but it needs to be changed. We can't have something like this in San Clemente. Not in the very soul of our community. It does not fit. Thank you.
Can I address a couple items?
Why don't we have everyone else speak and then we'll come back. Anyone else? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so everyone's had an opportunity to speak. Mr. Line, if you want to go ahead and address any other comments.
I just want to, Mr. Not very diplomatic. You were diplomatic, and I appreciated what you said and everything. A couple of things. We haven't fled San Clemente. We have over 500,000 square feet of space in San Clemente. Henry Lenny designed that building. And you said that it's not a Henry Lenny building. He designed that. And thank you for your comments.
Okay. All right, so fortunately, we have a planning commissioner who was here in 2012. So to a large degree, we're going to defer to his comments. And I'd like for him to kind of start out. And, one of the things I just want to say is that, you mentioned the code several times, that you meet code or you're, within code. But what we're looking at as the design review subcommittee is more of an aesthetic consideration. And we're looking at, things such as massing, scale, the overall height, the way the building is designed in terms of its hierarchy, its scale, its rhythm. There's a lot of things that go into a good building. So that's, certainly the density contributes to some of the issues. But those are the kind of things that we're going to be looking for you to have improved on, I think, from 2012. And the fact that we're seeing renderings of that submittal tells me there's not that much that's been changed in terms of those sort of key elements that we're looking for. So what we would typically look for you to do is say, this is, we believe, an approvable project now, and this is why, and address those specific elements like scale and massing, density, context. We don't want to spend a ton of time here today because I don't think it's really necessary on a project that was, I don't want to say it was rejected, but it was pulled off the table for some specific reasons. I don't know if it was financial or if you just decided to wait and come back. But, we'll go through this process here today, but in general, it's going to be a tough sell, with us. And we're not an approval body. We're here to make recommendations to the Planning Commission, and which ultimately will be to the City Council. So they'll have the authority to make whatever decision they like. But certainly, it's going to be a tough road with what we're seeing here today. I think it's a great presentation. I mean, obviously spent a lot of time. The drive-bys are cool. You've got a lot of good renderings. It's just really the nuts and bolts of the design that we're going to, have a problem with. So just sort of a general statement, but Commissioner Crandall, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on how you reacted to the design originally, and just comment on where we are here today.
Well, it did go through a lot of revisions and whatnot. I do have a question for John. If they didn't have the third floor, would not need a CUP?
I guess it would depend on what the overall height would be, but likely no.
Okay. So the project is looking for exceptions that would have to be reviewed by Planning Commission and Council. So it's automatically moved to Council. But we're tasked with getting it as close to something we think can be approved as possible. And that's the way we'll approach it. We're staying as close to the guidelines and requirements for development height limitations, etc. I've always been a little curious on this as far as calling this a slope site.
Pardon?
Is this
On
really a
what?
slope site, or is it a flat site and tiered in the back?
Well, I guess that's
Right now
that's
it's
for
pretty
the
flat.
the criteria for slope sites for the conditional use permit in the code and in the general plan are left relatively vague. So that's something that we need design review and planning commission input on.
Okay, because
But I mean, there is 15 feet of slope differential. So not every site is the same in the city, and so that's.
You know, some say it's original grade, some say it's existing grade if you don't know what the original grade was, and I don't know, I don't think we got that into the details of that, and I think that should be explored before.
Well, I
too
think
much
one of
is-
the comments I saw was that the applicant does have to show original grade to
Which-
develop the heights.
You know, I don't know what they have to refer back to. A lot of those records,
Because it's a
Have been
grade
lost or
change, but
whatnot.
it's not a slope.
and it's in the
per se.
back
Yeah.
quarter, or less than that probably.
About
of the site.
1/3. Yeah, I have
Third of the site, yeah.
It's about
So-
1/3 is slope.
So that kind of tells you, okay, if your height's 2 stories, everything there, if you go up, yeah, the back in that area, there'd be no complaint going 2-story at street level, back there over the slope, so something to consider.
So
I
there's a
think what I'd
conditional,
like
just real quick, there's a conditional use permit required because of the height. What other permits are required here? A cultural heritage permit,
Correct.
right? Okay, so isn't that what really triggers the aesthetic, the massing and the scale considerations more than the CUP?
Well, the CUP limits it, but we did have a historic consultant come on the job and review and make comments. And their comments, I think, are included in here. The project's so complicated, I think today we need to point out what each member has to look at and review. And then we're going to have to, it takes more than 4 days, once the packet's issued, to get your teeth into this thing. I mean, we're gonna have to live with a little bit to really understand everything that's gone on. But I appreciate everyone's comments. You know, I will say that the separation between the old city hall and the building was always discussed. We pushed for more. This is what the compromise that the applicant came up with and was willing to give us. It is a pedestrian-oriented project. So the courtyards are required, the archways are fine. Being 2 stories straight on the street is allowed, but then where 3-story occurs or is allowed, he's saying it's can be up to 10 feet or whatever. Well, with that grade, is it really allowed that far forward on the lot? We need to consider that. But I think we almost need a study session where we can sit down and really get into this thing, because I know the two of you have only had 3 days to look at it. That's not enough.
They didn't spend all 3 days either.
No. And you're not expected to at this point. But they put a lot of time into it. I don't think it would have been approved back when it was pulled. But we have an opportunity to really improve the T-zone with a good project, and I think we need to work as hard as we can to get the best thing for the city, working with Olin and whatnot, and we'll have to roll up our sleeves and get into it.
Yeah, we want to be.
We're here to help you come up with a project that works, rather than say, no, that doesn't work. You know, we're here to work with you to come up with something that.
Yeah, no,
can be
we
done.
want to give you some productive and constructive direction. And, you know, can you put the elevation up there again? An important consideration, as you know, is the context, right? And that's going to dictate to a large degree what you can do there. So, you know, there's a couple of options that you have. You know, you can sort of allow the existing, it's really the building that we're talking about on the right. You can allow that to sort of set the tone, or you can come up with a design that enhances that location by not dominating that structure, but by working with it. So I think you could still have the density, maybe not completely what you're looking for, but if you looked at this, let's say just the hierarchy of this elevation, you never look at buildings like this, you know, two-dimensionally, but I think it gives you a good feel for the fact that the building that you're proposing, it lacks focus, right? There's really nothing that draws your eye to that building. So you immediately look at the more interesting, I have to say more interesting, historic building and just feel like it's overpowering. And I'll be interested to hear what you have to say about that. But even when we're looking at it on the street view, you're looking down the street, really that's all you see because it's so massive in that location. And there's ways to reduce the visual impact without reducing the density. You know, we're not saying just do some small building. We're saying do a building that really addresses the location. You know, you saw that site plan. There's 8 significant historic buildings, and there's some great photos in this packet that give us a sense of the history of that location and how everything sort of evolved. And so that, I think that's really what you need to look at is, you know, how can we look at this zone and really enhance it? Not just looking at this corner and that building, because that doesn't paint a good picture for you right now. I think that's what you're hearing. You may not agree with me, but
No, I don't disagree.
But, well, let me finish, and then we definitely want to hear, because what we're trying to do here is help you, you know, come up with a project that we think is approvable. And again, we're just going to make a recommendation. It's going to be up to the city council ultimately to decide. But I think if we can work together, as Commissioner Crandall says, to try to come up with something that's more compatible, that's more appropriate for this location, and it's going to take some effort, and we're willing to help, you know, as much as we can. But just that, you know, kind of move up globally and think about that site more than, okay, we're meeting codes, we're using, you know, tile roofs and the plaster and, you know, the arch details that we need. It's more about the quality of that space in that location. And that's going to take a study that really looks at it from every angle. It looks at it from sort of the city as a whole, at least the downtown area as a whole, the context of the buildings around it, even though you could say that they don't impact the other ones as much, it does impact the downtown significantly. And so I think you have a rare opportunity here to really do something to enhance our city, to make it a kind of an iconic location that still is a moneymaker. And we understand there's economies that have to come into play here in terms of, it needs to make money. You're not going to build it. And that may have had something to do with the reason it was pulled originally. And I don't know if that's helpful, but I think that what we're seeing, what I'm seeing, and I don't know if you guys agree with me, is a building that's sort of, it's there's nothing special about it. It meets the basic requirements from a design standpoint, but I don't see a hierarchy of scale. I don't see a strong rhythm. I don't see a building that really stands out. And that's pretty vague information, but hopefully that's enough. I mean, a lot of times we'll show the Santa Barbara County Courthouse as an example. Just because it has, there's some interesting and let's say creative solutions to using this style of architecture, where your eye is drawn to this building. There's something special about it. So that's one, and that's an obvious one. There's others that we can look at, but that's and sort of big picture. That's the input that I would provide, and I don't know if you guys kind of agree with that.
Concur.
Yeah, I have a few comments, and you're done.
I'm done for now.
Okay. Kind of want to just put a bow a little bit on everyone's comments, because I appreciate everyone being here. In San Clemente General Plan, we had a lot of community input. A couple of them are sitting right back there. The way that emotion was organized in the plan, differing points of view brought together in a compromise, was through overlay districts. And you're sitting in the hot spot of every overlay district we got. What that's telling you is a lot of emotion. We could go through what these districts mean, pedestrian serving, orientation, and all that, but you guys are smart. You know what that means. What I would say is every architecture is telling a story. I would have you step back and ask yourself, what story are you telling here? When Ole Hansen stood on the dirt where that building was, he saw San Clemente Island, and that's how the city got its name. It was inspiration, and this is our core downtown. It's the busiest intersection. It's where everybody, what I think the residents are coming out here to say is, 100 years from now when we're all gone, we hope that when your project's done, that the residents 100 years from now fight the new developer coming in to keep it what you put in, right? So we go back to the story it's telling about this town, and the problems that you're hearing are is the monolithic presentation is not the story that we in San Clemente want to tell about ourselves, right? So I think Larry had a great idea about excavating and putting all the parking underneath. And you can get to 2 stories then, and you can get to an ROI if you do that with your units. Or maybe you put a third, but it's way back, and it's a row in the back with large patios so they can come and enjoy open space, private open space with ocean view. But from the street, you don't even know they're there. That tells a story that I think people would respond to. And if there's a way, these renderings for me were a challenge. I can't really see the light and shadow. I can't really see the details very well. So for me, it just tells a story of massing that is unappealing. That's what you're hearing. So part of it could be the way that the renderings appear to us. But to the degree that you can create some separation from the Easley building, and even between the buildings there, like it looks like you're trying to be recessed in the middle there, but it doesn't. The rendering maybe doesn't help show that very well. But it would be nice if people didn't go, oh, look at that huge building, like, oh, there's a building there, oh, there's a building there, oh, look, inside there's a small little restaurant in there. Does that make sense? It's more breaking things up so that it doesn't look like one large thing. It tells a story of, well, we have this here, we have this here, we have that there. We have maybe a plaza between the Easley building and the new building that you could be used for people to go sit down and eat, or it could just be for people to go and sit with that are walking down the street from other places. The unspoken thing in our code about this district, why it's the pedestrian overlay, it's the commercial central downtown business overlay, the visitor serving overlay, every overlay we have, it's all right there. Think about date night. We want people to come to this space and mill around and enjoy it and sit and linger and see San Clemente Island, or walk down to Active Culture, or walk down to another business, or go down to Del Mar. And this could serve all of that with your parking underground, with the way that you're interfacing your the mixed use is great, right? You've got the commercial first floor, could have combination of restaurants and other businesses, and we want your building to activate our downtown and be visitor serving and resident serving and all the rest. So that's the opportunity, and I think there is a path to getting this approved. If you can tell the story differently and you can reflect all, the comments that you've heard with another approach. Hope that was helpful.
That was good, thanks.
Mhm.
Mr. Crandall, you got any?
I think, like I say, I'm kind of for if we can get some kind of study session where we work with staff and get some of these questions answered, what really applies, and work with the applicant also, like a charrette, whatever we want to call it.
Yeah, we can do that.
The applicant to,
Yeah, you're showing your age when you use the word charrette. Because I know that word too.
yeah, been through a lot of those.
Yeah.
But I think that would be really helpful. I mean, this is complicated enough that I want to make sure we aren't spending your money on a dead end where we can do something that's progressive. We get the ideas in there without having to come up with, engineered grading plans, et cetera, just.
And that's why we're here to listen. We wanted your feedback, staff's feedback, we're all for that.
Yeah, I mean, loose sketches, we're all for, so you don't have to go to the expense. And, we can make ourselves available to just review stuff on a fairly informal basis. And then when we have these hearings, they're not hearings, I guess they are hearings, whatever we call it. These meetings, that can be a little more formal in terms of, after we sort of get to a point where we feel like you have an approvable design. Because this is a great piece of property. I mean, you have a significant opportunity here to really do something special in the city. And we think you can do it.
Well, you don't think we should put our name on the sit and sleep building?
We're excited to get something.
Well, that brings you under the sign ordinance. We have to have a conversation about the sign.
Yeah, we're all for developing this site,
Yeah.
obviously. And nothing that we say is meant to be personal. I mean, we're trying to represent the city and also help you guys get a project built that's going to be good for you and certainly it's going to be good for the city.
Thank you.
So hopefully that's been helpful, our feedback?
It has been. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, my day started at the DMV today. I was a little nervous which was going to be better. You know, this was better.
Oh, we exceeded, okay, wow, that's a huge compliment.
No, it's not. DMV's terrible.
I'm kidding. Okay.
Yes.
I
right.
think unless you guys have any other comments or questions, we look forward to seeing you come back with.
Yeah, I look forward to working with you. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne. Good seeing you guys.
Good seeing you.
Man, get out.
Okay, do we
Put him on the diet for 4 years.
do we skip over the meeting?
We did skip over the minutes, we can probably wrap that up.
You guys can
It's just
approve
you
them,
and
I
I
wasn't
voting
here.
on it.
Okay. So I reviewed them. I thought it was fine.
Yeah, I will make a motion that we adopt the minutes of the January 24th, 2024 design review subcommittee meetings as is.
Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
I'm gonna abstain, I wasn't there.
Yeah, we could use your help on that. Could use your help on that.
On the last one, they actually reached out to me.
We
and
spent
said,
some time.
You weren't there, you need to make comments. So I sent written comments, which is a lot harder to do.
Jonathan, do you want that?
Yes, thank you, sir.
Okay, let's move on to our next item of business, which is Cultural Heritage Permit 23-318, Moses Residence at 239 Avenida La Cuesta. David, you got a presentation for us?
Yes, I do. Good afternoon. I have the applicant's team here with me today. We have Dustin, the architect, and John Moses, the property owner, and then Jennifer as part of the architect's team as well. So again, this is a cultural heritage permit request. Project site is located at 239 Avenida La Cuesta. You can see on the screen that it's in between two historic properties. One of the historic properties is to the left of it, 233 Avenida La Cuesta, and then we have the Goldschmidt home or residence at 243 Avenida La Cuesta. The zoning for this property and the abutting historic resources is residential low. So some background on the Goldschmidt residence. It was constructed in 1928 during the Ole Hansen period of development. Its architect was Paul R. Williams. He's well known for work that he did in LA, Los Angeles. Another reason why this was listed is for its architecture at Spanish Colonial Revival. And this is also on the National Register of Historic Places, which it was listed on there in 2004. And I'll do a quick arrow use here. So this window here, we'll talk a little bit more about that. This is an aerial view of the Goldschmidt residence, and this window here is something that we've been working with the applicant to preserve its view from public view.
Preserve view from public or from, or preserve the view?
Preserve the view of that window and the residence as a whole from the street. Yeah. This is 233 Avenida La Cuesta, and some documents is known as the Campo residence. It was constructed in 1941, not within the Ole Hansen period of development. Its architect is Aubrey St. Clair. He did work in Laguna. Builders were the String Brothers, and the architectural style identified in historic documents is Hollywood Regency. So the proposal is for a modern single-family residence. It's close to, or maybe a little bit over, 6,000 square feet.
with an attached 3-car garage. It will accommodate 3 or 6 bedrooms, 1 powder bathroom, and 7 full bathrooms. We can see here on the rendering to the right that it does have a flat roof design, which we'll talk a little bit more in the coming slides, and then common outdoor spaces such as a sports court, which accommodates a basketball and pickleball court, pool and spa, and some patios. So here's a close-up of a rendering viewed from the street, from Cuesta. And this is another rendering from within the property. This would be a view from the west side looking east. So here's a proposed site plan. In blue we have the proposed building footprint. In yellow we have the Goldschmidt home. In green we have the sports court. And then this red dashed line shows how the development is not obstructing the view of that window. Here are some materials. The color palette that's proposed it's a light earth tone color. We do see some contrast in the windows and doors with black trims. The project will have wood siding. We're looking at some porcelain tile, some glass railings as well, along with some white stucco. So the reason why we're here today is because cultural heritage permits require design review. We're mainly here to get feedback from the subcommittee members on the topics listed here. So visual impacts of projects on abutting historic resources and landmarks, architectural quality and style, massing, scale, proportions, landscaping, and materials. So throughout the process, I've been in touch with the historic property owners. We've been on phone calls, we've been communicating via email, and we did have a site visit with the architect as well. I did provide a longer list in the staff report of comments that summarize their questions and concerns. These are some notable ones related to the view preservation, irrigation and drainage, seismic or expansive soil pressure, and then neighborhood compatibility.
You met with both neighbors, both sides?
Correct, yeah. So as far as the project's consistency with development standards, it does comply with all, including height, setbacks, landscaping, and parking. Overall, staff believes that the project is generally consistent with the design guidelines. The project shows sensitivity to the public view, again, a view of the Goldschmidt residence, specifically the window from the street. There are varied wall plane breaks throughout the proposal. There is a relatively large front yard setback of 45 feet 2 inches. And the modern architecture that's proposed is also seen throughout the neighborhood. And there is an analysis that the applicant provided against the design guidelines, and then some pictures of homes within the neighborhood. Design guidelines also talk about the treatment of roofs. Staff has some recommendations to improve its consistency with that part of the guidelines. To the right, we see an image of the proposed flat roof design and its exposure of the skylights and 3 chimneys. So to improve that, we are asking or recommending that roof height variation be provided. The applicant will have a comment on that. We also recommend that the skylights blend in with the roof. We're recommending that a solar panel zone be pre-designated on plans in a place which can potentially reduce any glare impacts from a future installation. And then also simplifying the arrangement of skylights. And again, this is keeping in mind that the Goldschmidt residents may potentially have a view of the top of the roof. So that concludes my presentation. Again, we have the applicants and staff available for questions.
Okay, anybody have any questions with David?
Yeah. Now, this came before us years ago. Is this the same design?
For a different design.
Okay. Because the setbacks for view of the arched window and the historic residences, that's why it's 40 some odd feet setback. So that was something that was reviewed and required. And they apparently complied with that. My question for staff is, it might make things simpler for us to stay out of the loop on rear yard landscaping. That's not something we normally review. And you've shown it on there. If we don't review it and make any comments on it, is there anything back there that requires any kind of discretionary review by either commission or design review?
Yeah, well, we do know as part of the previous project, there were some comments or questions regarding a fuel mod plan that was approved by Orange County Fire Authority. This project has not gone through that yet. They're actually in the middle of that process. So that I can't think of any other.
No, so any development generally adjacent, that's directly adjacent to a historic property is still going to require some form of discretionary action. But landscape only, like if we imagine that this residence was already there and we're only reviewing rear yard landscape to that question, that's something that could be done through an administrative process. So that the scope and scale of landscape only, you're certainly welcome and able to comment on that, but on its own would not require an independent discretionary action.
Okay, the reason I brought it up is I can see that pickleball court, whatever, is going to get a lot of comment. I mean, and it's not something that we would normally review. And it would certainly make our job a lot easier if that wasn't shown in the design review process and the planning commission review process. Is that something that is out of the question, or?
So let me give you a response in a moment. What I want to
We have no way of basing any of our decisions because there is no code for it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's certainly a hot topic.
What I wouldn't want to happen is, to your point, and I think this is what you're going for, is to have something be removed that then would require them to come back for a separate approval and go through the process twice if that was necessary. So I'm going to take a look because I think that our recent code revisions that shuffled how we handle development processes would touch on that. So I'll confirm and let you know.
Great, that's a good answer.
Okay, a question I have. You know, we're looking at this because there's a cultural heritage permit requirement.
Yeah.
And most of these that we look at, they're small properties. You know, you can see both buildings from the street. Both, you know, where in this case you guys picked a nice one right in the middle, two of them. But we're evaluating the impact from the street, the view of these historical buildings, which, by the way, you can hardly see from the street, and the impact that this proposed building has on those from the street. And yet, the only thing you've really talked about is the view corridor from the adjacent house. Is that? It seems odd. I mean that we're. It's great that they're providing the view, but I just want to make sure that we're evaluating this in the appropriate manner. If you can't see the buildings from the street, and you hardly can see this one, I would tend to focus more like on the landscape even.
In the front, I absolutely agree on the front.
Yeah. So we got to consider, and from both sides, I guess, are we considering what you see from the adjacent house looking at this house? Does that come into play? I just want to make sure, I don't really understand exactly why, even though, I understand it meets the criteria of requiring a cultural heritage permit. What are we supposed to be looking at here?
Yeah, if I could jump in real quick and comment on that. So the topic of view preservation, the city doesn't have private view protection from residences looking out, and that's citywide. But we do protect certain public views, so public view corridors from certain streets, parks, or other public places that have scenic vistas that are important. So we have a section in our general plan that will identify those areas that would need to be protected. But we also have a level of desire to protect view towards historic residences. So this is almost the flip of what the public would normally think of in view preservation. In this case, we're trying to maintain accessibility of historic properties when we go through this review process. And some examples just for general public consumption, that wasn't done with Casa Romantica, right? Where you have a property that's set back deeply and then adjacent to that on either side, really substantial development that now you can only see the property once you're on the property itself. So you lose a lot of that visibility from the public right of way. So that's what we want to protect in this case. And then as far as from neighboring properties looking onto this property, it would be a similar evaluation for other development permits where we're looking at compatibility questions. So there's not a specific finding, but you do have some latitude to discuss whether or not you think certain elements are compatible with the neighboring properties. Does that answer?
Yeah, that's helpful. So we're also considering, the view potentially from above or from some other angles other than just the street is where I think that's what you're saying.
It can be. If I can give one example, so Design Review previously raised some compatibility concerns with the Miramar, for instance, really the bowling alley, and with the repurposing of that building and how many roof penetrations for exhaust equipment were proposed on the El Camino Real side. So in that sense, they said, we don't think that that's compatible. There may be more, it would be more compatible to have that type of equipment on the alley side. So that's where we would like to get your feedback, is if you think that there are certain things that don't make sense in a certain adjacency context or location on the property, we can take that type of feedback into account.
Okay. Is that clear to you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I would just ask you guys about this neighbor concerns around light, air, these 4 bullet points.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm kind of with him. Typically where it's just a street and it's like, oh, that thing is huge, and I mean, it's similar to the conversation we've just had. That's all the time it's similar. Hey, that massing's giant, blocking the view, you're blocking this, not that. And I don't know that we've gotten into soil issues and all that. So I'm assuming that's, you're talking through those yourself, and we're not going to get into the soil and the drainage and the land, all that stuff, right?
No.
No, we don't get into that.
Okay, so I just want to clarify that. And then with this rendering, I really don't have the context for how it interfaces with the adjacent properties. I can't judge it at all. And therefore, I feel handicapped. I mean, I feel like I don't know how to develop a point of view.
Yeah, well, just to kind of piggyback that, we're not looking at a style of architecture here, right? That's obvious in the context of this neighborhood. So you talk about compatibility, and I guess that has more to do with, and I don't want to get into our discussion here yet, but just so I understand, that has more to do with just the quality of the design, I guess, and
Well, we're not in an architectural overlay zone.
yeah, so
It's cultural heritage. It's not even so
they can do any style they want.
But we're here because they are adjacent to two historic.
Yeah.
But they're not obligated to be historic unless
Unless they
there's
want
something lingering in the history of the property that says it has to be Spanish. And I saw some paperwork on that, and I don't know where that's gonna go.
Yeah, it was a little confusing when you said in here that they're subject to our design guidelines. I didn't know how, because this is not, I mean, has nothing to do with Spanish colonial revival at all. So I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I can look at the general principles around neighboring properties and those considerations, and I printed it out even just because I wanted to make sure I understood that there's a relationship issue between the properties versus maybe the style, the design style, right? It's always more to the concept of, well, how does this sit in relationship to the neighboring properties, and how does it interface with those properties, if at all? And part of it, that's where my previous comment where I couldn't do it. And I also feel like there's so much landscape screening on the street. It obscures the view of almost everything. I don't really, you can't see it. I mean, so I'm like, okay, how does this, I just don't understand the relationship.
Let's just let this play out, I guess, and maybe it'll become clear.
Okay.
Why, or what we're supposed to be.
Well, saying it, so maybe you guys can help us with that. Yeah.
And our applicant, do you guys have any kind of presentation you want to make?
I mean, not anything other than what we've got there, and I think, again, for your point, I think we're here because of the home on both sides are historic. We were obviously completely aware of that. The client was completely aware of that coming into this property. And as you can see now, I think in that bottom rendering on the right-hand side clearly illustrates, you can see the white building in the back, and that white building in the back is where that arched window is. And we, on set number 1, looked back at the previous 2 designs that were approved on that lot and looked at all of the issues that came up in the subcommittee meetings and what was approved and kind of what their concerns were. And we started at that point, and the main one being definitely preserving the public's view of that historic building and not trying to take anything away from that. There will be a building there, so there's no denying there will be a building there. But we try to maintain that view for ultimately what Dave was bringing up, the public's view of it, to appreciate that building and its historic nature. The one to the left, what they call the Hollywood House, is obscured by trees. You can't actually see it. It's hard to see from the road. So it is there. And I know in speaking with both neighbors, we met with both neighbors, their concern is the view of our building over theirs. Right now there's a pool area there. This building is designed to hopefully maximize the views, but also respect the rest of the neighborhood. And as you can see, neighborhood's saying it kind of lightly in that we've done a view analysis. I don't know if you could go back to that one of our view analysis, where we kind of outline the fact that there is a mix of buildings and expressions in that neighborhood. So my take back from, if you go down to, or up to that.
Yeah, that was that little collage.
With all the numbers on it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, like in driving through, that was again another place where we started. Like I wouldn't go into that neighborhood and feel an overarching presence of Spanish. I think there are beautiful Spanish buildings in that neighborhood that, again, we've pulled the building back. We've placed a lot of vegetation in front of it. We have definitely made the view corridor of that Ole Hansen, well, not the Ole Hansen, of the Spanish home next to it a massive priority. And yeah, I'd say like it's not aiming at being a Spanish building. It is set back far from the road, but at the same time, we're trying to maximize the views of the ocean. And that's why the building is pulled up.
Okay, let's just talk about those 2 buildings that flank. Do you feel like you're compatible? And if you do, can you explain how you're compatible and why you think so? And talk about, not just the views of those buildings, but how you're sort of situated in that context. And that should include landscape and a definitive concept for landscape. which I haven't heard anything about. We're focusing mostly on the
Can I
house.
just acknowledge, first of all, we bought an empty lot. It's been empty for 100 years. Those two properties that are adjacent to are large properties with large homes. It's the lot in the middle that we own is 0.6 acres. So it's a good sized property. And what it was for 100 years was a tennis court for the Hollywood Hills home, the Hollywood Regency home next to it. It's been a flat, empty lot with a cement tennis court. That's what it was. Just so people understand the context. This is an empty lot. It's been an empty lot forever. It was a part of that larger property that was at some point zoned off of it. I think there's been 2 attempts where people have designed homes there that have been approved, and we've respected all of the feedback that came through those 2 processes. So I'll just leave it at that.
That doesn't really answer the question.
Yeah, but you can't see the home to the left. The Hollywood Regency home from the street, you would never. It's very difficult to see.
Yeah, I think what I'm talking about is the context from the street.
Yeah.
Just, again, it's a sort of a fruit cocktail, the whole neighborhood. But, because you're sandwiched between 2 historic properties, you have to sort of focus on that. And so when I think through this idea of context and compatibility, I sort of feel that there should be some connection.
We were told to stay away from those.
I'm just telling you that.
Yeah, so David, I don't know if you want to
those
speak to that
words,
guidance from the
to
start.
me, they mean, how do you connect these properties? These 3 properties, and maybe it's, hey, we just put it far enough back that you don't see it, so there is no connection. But when I look at those properties, there is some quality landscape, for instance, and there's some well-designed landscape, and I don't see that as being part of your presentation per se. And that would be a direction to go, to help you. So maybe you have thought about that.
So yeah, and I appreciate that we don't have a rendering of both landscapes, and I think that would definitely help our case. But as you can see, this is the landscape plan, and obviously, again, we have tried to be very respectful of that view corridor, because that view corridor kind of comes down this way. So if you notice, the Hollywood Hills house is densely bushed, densely populated. You can't see anything. So the proposal was, and this is the steepest area of the slope, it drops off significantly in grade. So the idea was to, again, create something that has trees, so it's somewhat high here, so that ultimately when you're driving up the street, you have the bushing, then this would be grass, and then we suggested some olive trees planting that brings the height and scale and tries to kind of hide the fact that we have a garage and driveway there. So the idea should be that you don't see much of this concrete and that you're not seeing much of that, but also we didn't, then it gets smaller and smaller and the trees stop, and then in here it's all low vegetation, because as it goes towards the Spanish home, towards that side, it's all lower vegetation. Obviously that is their view corridor. So trying to stay within the natural grade of the slope, as well as kind of being aware that it is high on the left-hand side and then fairly sparse on the right-hand side towards the Spanish home.
Mm-hmm. Okay, makes sense. Okay, did you guys have anything else you wanted to say?
That's it.
All right, everyone here on this project?
Yes.
Okay, so you heard our comments before. Just if you're going to be redundant, just say, hey, I agree with those guys. And then we'll go on to the next. So Larry usually has quite a bit to say. So do you want to speak on this one, Larry?
Yeah, I'd like to speak, but I think if the owners next door would.
I'd like to speak.
Oh, you're the owner next door.
Yes, of the Hollywood Regency, not Hollywood Hills, the 233.
Okay, do we have the other owner on the other side?
Yes, sir, right over here.
Why don't we start with her, since she's the lady? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, brevity is not my gift, so bear with me. My spouse and I, the man right there, we live in an old house next door to the proposed project. Our house at 243 Avenida La Cuesta, as you know, is called the Goldschmidt House. It was built by the Goldschmidt family in 1928. Of note, the Goldschmidt family originally owned much of the land that then became San Clemente. Their holdings were sold to Cotton, and this lot was retained for their home. Our home is building permit number 14 for the city and was designed by the renowned architect Paul Revere Williams. Beyond being a San Clemente historical resource, it is one of only 6 San Clemente buildings on the National Historic Register, and it is the only private residence with that designation. We believe that these facts make our home historically, culturally, and architecturally significant. I would also argue that you can see our home from the street. You can certainly see it from the driveways where there's no vegetation, and you can see it from La Cuesta, and I can see it and pick it out from other places down the hill. If you know to look for that window, you can see it from Ace Hardware, you can see it from the church down there. There's plenty of places where you can see our home. There are 5 designated historic properties nearby on La Cuesta: 193, 199, 209, 233, and 243. Looking at the proximal neighborhood, it is mostly set back where possible. Often, the buildings present as one story from the street, and generally, properties have significant plantings. While the materials for 239 shows homes that are not of this character, some of those homes are actually on Avenida del Oro and do not reflect the overall character of the La Cuesta neighborhood. As you consider the proposed project at 239 Avenida La Cuesta, I would ask that you keep in mind the significance that we own an old house. Being listed means that we cannot make changes to the exterior of our home, including the windows. If you allow this project to block airflow, we cannot pop in a new window or change an existing window that does not open. In addition, our windows are from 1928, meaning no dual panes. This is significant for both air and noise. In fact, our heating is hydronic, not forced air. We were told it would be possible to add air conditioning to the living room because it is elevated. We were also told that adding air to the rest of the home would be problematic and best solved with window units that would not be allowed on a historic home. This is rarely a problem because we rely on ocean breezes. The home was designed to capture ocean breezes that come from the direction of Dana Point and through the vacant lot. We ask that you please do not let this structure block all of our air. Perhaps you're thinking, why did we buy next to a vacant lot? And that I can explain. In 2018, when we made an offer on the home, we met with the previous owner, Lee Van Slyke's wife, Dina, and we went to the city to look at the approved plans for the vacant lot. We evaluated the proposed structure and we found it acceptable to us. We were assured by the city that no significant changes could be made. The approved building was set back 54 feet from the street. It had a more articulated structure and had larger setbacks on both sides. Since that time, the lot sold and another project was proposed. The last one was set back by at least 54 feet and was one story. Now the lot has sold again, and we are evaluating a home that we feel is out of scale for the neighborhood, out of scale for the lot, and developed closer to the street than what we were led to believe was acceptable. We did not intervene at the other city reviews. We understand that building on this lot is something that's going to happen. But the reason we did not intervene is because those projects were acceptable. The historic homes on both sides are set back, meaning the proposed forward position is detrimental to privacy, light, and airflow. I know that the previous owners worked hard to get to an acceptable development in 2018. It seems bad faith to be changing the game at this point. The forward position of the proposed project also means that our living room is the closest part of the home to the project and will be most at risk for construction damage. In the 5 years since we have owned the home, we've invested in shoring up the foundation for the living room, which was showing some downslope movement due to expansive soils. We have also added French drains around the living room, added rain gutters, and sealed the foundation to protect the property. We are extremely concerned about major construction proximal to the living room. The living room is a single story but has a spectacular original over 12-foot high wood ceiling. Any movement resulting in damage would be beyond heartbreaking. So what are we asking? We hope that the city will respect our historic home and neighborhood and not improve this structure. From our perspective, there will be minimal articulation, a large, flat-roofed, almost warehouse-looking facade with windows looking into our home, light and air blockage, and a risk to the home. As proposed, it will dwarf the two neighboring homes and will be dominant with the proposed setbacks. Finally, the last thing I would like to address, even though you probably don't want me to, is the proposed pickleball court. City code designates, quote, "It shall be unlawful for any person to willfully or negligently make or continue or cause to be made or continued any loud, unnecessary, or unusual noise which disturbs the peace and quiet of any neighborhood or which causes any discomfort or annoyance to any reasonable person of normal sensitivity to residing in the area." Our neighborhood is quiet. There's no through traffic, it's a destination neighborhood, it's quiet. With the ongoing battles over the San Gregorio pickleball courts, the city should be well aware of the issues associated with pickleball in a neighborhood setting. I mentioned earlier that our home has no air conditioning and single glazed windows, meaning no relief from potential noise. The allowable code for residential noise is 55 decibels in daytime and 50 decibels from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Most pickleball studies come in at around 80 decibels. Imagine this was your home and consider how you would like to live next to a potential nuisance. Feel like the owners truly desire a private pickleball court, then perhaps interior space should be allocated for that purpose. I thank you for your time, and I ask that you please consider asking for a more articulated and respectful project that is set back the original 54 feet from the street and set back from the neighboring properties.
Okay, thank you. So there's a few things there that you're asking for. I think we could probably summarize those. But anyway, thanks for that. And sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you. First of all, like our neighbor, we understand that this property will be developed at some point in the state of 100 years, but it will happen. We welcome our new neighbors to San Clemente. We love it just as much as everybody else here. All that said, maybe a point of clarification would be helpful. At no point have we debated or sought for on either side of this house to protect the view from that arch window. We understand that's out of scope, and our city doesn't protect views. And that brings me to my second point, which is the renderings that are shown here of the new development show it from a very low angle and accurately from a certain point on that road. But if you were to walk up 10 to 15 yards and look directly from the front of the proposed design, it is not only prominent, it is dominant, I would say, taken from a different angle. So I would ask the committee to consider images and renderings of the proposed design, not from that one design, but from multiple, not from that one angle, but multiple angles, I think would be eye-opening for the committee. Secondly, the Goldschmidt home is extremely visible from the road, as is our home, albeit the characterizations were correct, it's hedged off. But again, from a different angle, from higher up in the road, from outside of the Goldschmidt home, it is visible. So again, everything's in the angle and how the renderings are designed, and I think that the renderings here were unfortunate. And also the inference that we're objecting to, trying to protect the view, is also unfortunate if it in fact was made, because what we're asking for is a design that isn't dominant, that doesn't conflict with the historic nature of the neighborhood. We understand. There's a, what did you say, fruit salad? I think that's, we can't argue with that statement, that's fair. But that part of that neighborhood has maintained its historic flavor, and it is an historic resource. And both of these homes are very important, I think, to the city. So I think those just small points of clarification are helpful. I won't be repetitive. The mass and the positioning of the home are major concerns for us, as well as we believe that the previously approved designs were one story, although I can't state that for sure. The pickleball is a concern for sure, and the high-rise nature of the design, we've referred to as high-rise, is definitely a concern. And getting back to the original point where every architecture tells a story, we've consulted heavily with Henry Lenny on this project. We've submitted a letter from him stating his concerns around the project. We share those concerns, and we welcome our new neighbors. We ask them to reconsider the design and the position and the mass of the proposed design and reconsider, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, does everyone here want to speak about this project that's here? I know you do, Larry. And you do, sir. Anyone else
Yeah, behind you.
interested in speaking?
I have some questions.
We have a former owner here too,
Former owner.
owned it for 25 years.
Okay. Right, so if you could just keep your comments brief and please don't be repetitive. Why don't we start with you, sir?
Sure. So my name is Lee Van Slyke. My wife Dina and I owned the home and restored it between 1997 and 2014.
Thank you.
Which home?
Well, we owned it until 2019. We restored it until 2014. That 17 years was the period during which we got it placed on the National Register of Historic Places. Now, that's a designation that Costa Pacifica doesn't have. It's something you go look up if you're a history buff and you see, oh, there is one of these in San Clemente, and you want to go see it. It's so significant that the city, just before Thanksgiving of 2023, put a tile plaque of the Goldschmidt House with Dina in a Model A on the 200 block of Avenida Del Mar. It's a really, really historic, significant building. And our restoration of that included every side of it, okay? But the important thing is the idea of the view of the front of the house as you drive along. And as you come up Avenida La Cuesta, this house would be initially, well, first of all, you have 233, which would be with the landscaping block the view. Then this house would block the view. And then the historic home would come into view. But by being only 45 feet from the street instead of 54, it's going to come into view about the time you get to the actual lot of Avenida La Cuesta. So it's definitely an impairment of the public's ability to view this historic resource. And that's what I would encourage you to think about is the standard here in San Clemente is the public's view of the historic resource. And that this historic resource is so unique and so beautifully preserved that it will, I mean, you can tell by the number of people here, it's going to get some heat if that view is not preserved.
Okay, thank you. Larry?
Yeah, I was going to say something about how important that window is to me personally, because Jane and I visited all the historic homes, and that was, when we saw that, we were in awe. So, but it's already been well established how important that particular window is, not for the view out, but for the public. It's the first thing you see coming up the street. That if you can put up that slide, it shows the line of sight looking out the window, the red line. I maintain that line is in the wrong position. If you can pass that over. You start seeing as you're coming up Avenida La Cuesta, you start seeing that building when you're right at 232 La Cuesta, good 50 feet before you get to the point where they, so that line, instead of crossing where it does there on their property line, it should be further up, actually on the next property up. You start seeing it 300 feet before you get to the property. So it's really important that you consider that. The project needs to be pushed back further and made less bulky. How can they do that? The lot is 27,000 square feet. The proposed house is 6,250 square feet. But the footprint of that house would be under 3,000 square feet. So they should be able to move a 3,000 foot footprint a little bit further off on that 27,000 foot lot. The structure could easily be moved back from the street, further away from the Goldschmidt house, and still have the view that the owner wants and over 20,000 square feet to play with. The house could be downsized. A house that's 6,250 square feet is about 3 times the size of a typical house. With respect to the architecture, Mr. Morris, the architect, states that the owners, quote, have chosen to build a modern house to ensure there is no confusion of what is the historic home and what is the new home. This design goes way beyond eliminating confusion. It screams, I'm different from anything else in the neighborhood. On the compatibility study, if you could put that up, David, that next 4 pages shows the other houses in the neighborhood. That's your attachment 6. There's not a single house in the neighborhood that even remotely related to the architectural style of what they're proposing. All the other houses are predominantly 1 story in their mission or Spanish or ranch, but nothing is I call it outrageously modern. So there's nothing wrong with building in the Spanish colonial style next to an Ole Hansen home. On the contrary, it's preferable. In the architectural overlay, it's required. So I urge you to recommend that the project be downsized, pressed away from the street, pushed away from the historic home, and redesigned in Spanish colonial revival style.
Okay, thank you. Sir?
So just for context, I actually represent the 2 homeowners, and as part of that, we've engaged Mr. Henry Lenny as a consultant to help advise not only us but the process. Mr. Henry Lenny's on the phone. He's actually been listening to the entire presentation, and Mr. Henry Lenny, with my help and the help of the homeowners, penned 2 pieces of correspondence which we sent to Design Review Committee that talk about compatibility and all of those elements. So we're not going to repeat what he's had to say and his view of it. But I just want to touch on a couple things. You know, the concept of architecture, Ayn Rand, who's had these great books called The Fountainhead, talked about altruism versus self-interested concepts. And I think what's missing here is exactly what the Design Review Committee said. What is the design relationship and context of this project relative to anything around it? And what's missing, not in an altruistic sense, but in a self-interested sense, is that design relationship. We don't have any projections from the middle of that project with either house on the side, from other parts of the city, from overviews, to give it an understanding of how it sits in that space. And I think that this notion of a self-interested project really comes into bearing with the comments of Mr. Culbertson, who said it's massive. It's maxed out the lot. It's put it totally to the front. It's created a 2-story design with overviews that look into the Hollywood Regency House with basically monolithic walls that block all of the different angles and interesting angulations of the Goldmich House. So in other words, it's a look at me, I stand alone. The problem is, in that site that's been untouched for 100 years, no one has really considered how it can stand in relation to the other projects. And until this design review gets some more insight into that relationship, you cannot have someone who has a self-interested project of massive scope, massive location, and siting without any of these other considerations. Just say, look at it, it's super cool and very different, and hope to get a check off. The concept of the architectural overlay zone, I would actually differ with the Design Review Committee. This is a historical register site, which means the entire public from around the world comes to this location looking for that kind of significant project to admire and then get a feel of the community. And if they come up that ramp and see this, albeit very elegantly made design, it's going to look at, wow, this is a massive Newport Beach, Corona del Mar, modern LA type urbanist design. Wow, look at it. And in that same voice, completely drown out the 100-year significance of these treasures. In 100 years, respectfully, I don't know that the EO design is going to have that kind of stature. That's not us for us to judge, but at this point, the design review committee should at least require more of an altruistic approach of how do you relate to how significant these other sites are, whether or not they're obscured in whole or in part. And I don't think that effort's been made here at all. Without that effort, I'm not sure you can give positive feedback, because I think, as one of you speakers mentioned, it's hard to even tell how this looks relative to anything else. And I think the message here is, it doesn't matter what we look like relative to anything else. We want to stand alone and get approved. And I don't think that's allowable at that site. Which, by the way, all of us here would be speculating as to how it's ultimately going to get developed, because it's been 100 years a dirt pad. So this is the singularly most important decision a design review committee and the city could do. How do we elevate what Ole Hans's original vision was for that Hills of San Clemente, which he dubbed an actual development site with these estate-sized lot? How are we going to give it context and relationship that is meaningful to what we know to be absolute treasures, and so does the rest of the country? And I want to make one point that I think is continues to be bandied by the applicant and his designer, which is they were told that the city and the owners wants a concept other than Spanish at that site. First of all, I don't think there's any empirical information to support that. I've not seen any record of that, and I think it's disingenuous to suggest that their design is being driven by some mandate of the community, the city, or any board of saying you can only build something other than Spanish to diminish. I think, in fact, the contrary is true. You need to build something that is compatible and qualitatively appropriate for your neighbors. Respect your neighbors, respect the community, and not just come in and want to stand alone without that altruistic consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Behind you. Yeah, I just
Oh,
have-
that's right, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I want to say that I concur with everything else, and two things I wanted to add. This house is also known as Casa Tres Vistas, and so that means that the view inside the home in 3 locations is definitely part of what is seen as its historic value. When the Historical Society would look at San Clemente as a whole, this is a home that we hope becomes a museum because of its historical significance. So when you're looking at it as a single family home, know that one day we hope to make it otherwise a place that people can see not only from the street, but also enjoy from the inside. So I want you to keep those 2 things in mind. I think that the presentation definitely underplayed the value of the architect itself. And so I think that that's something you should do a little bit more research on before you make any decision, because I believe in the slide presentation it just said, and he designed other homes in Los Angeles, and that is not quite as accurate as we'd like you to know.
He's not still alive.
No, and here's 2 books many books that have been written about Paul Revere Williams, who went to USC in around 1919 and who was a black man, which is very unusual in those days. And he probably built well over 3,000 buildings throughout Los Angeles. So just to put more into what Katie just said.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. A lot of good points.
I had a quick question.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Excuse me. Yeah, my name's Don Wenzel. I'm co-owner of the Goldsmith House. And I'm not going to try to repeat what's been said previously, but my concern is that the renderings that we've seen, the 2-dimensional line drawings, don't give us enough information as to how impacted this line of sight for the public to the arched window, the southwest elevation. And the question that I have for the architects and committee members that are here is if story poles, if required, would they add to our understanding of what the visual impact of this proposed structure is? I also wanted to reinforce the fact that the 2 previous projects that were approved years ago required a 53 and a 54-foot frontage setback, not 45, as was implied earlier. And lastly, I'm going to be the one looking at this flat-top roof for many years, hopefully a few. And I'm concerned about how many skylights are there, how they're positioned, how many then stack pipes we're going to be looking at, and also from a noise perspective where the air conditioning compressors are going to be located on the property. And then finally, I think as well as worried about the structure obstructing the public view, to have some kind of restraints put on the height of the landscaping in the front of the property that might over time obscure that public view.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to miss.
Can you go to number 8, slide number 8 that you had up there? Yeah, that one. So my question is, where are you measuring the 45 feet from on this? Where is the 45-foot setback?
I believe
being
it's
measured
from, it doesn't correct me, it's from this
That's
corner.
the closest point, so
To
it
here.
varies from 45.
It's from here to here?
Correct.
Because this is an elevated entryway, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so does that not affect the sightline at all? Should we not be measuring from out here?
It's well below that. I mean,
Is
it's just a walkway.
Because I know when I come up the hill, there's landscaping now that is on that slope from Goldschmidt. So I'm also concerned about this and this. What is being drawn here in terms of is this
That was
vegetation?
low Cassian grass. Again, just to stay really low and ultimately kind of, I'd like to think improve it. It's just going to be low, wavy grass, basically, that sets up for that view of the window.
And is there a reason why you can't go back 9 more feet? What is you mentioned earlier that it was protecting the views. Could you
So
not
they've already done quite an extensive slope stability analysis, which cost about $20,000, and they shot a man 70 feet down. The slope is not, it's not on the land side, it's not caving down, but ultimately it is both more expensive and harder to develop closer to that slope. So the development would be better served away from that slope. So that was kind of the idea behind pulling it away from that slope and the expense and getting too close to that slope.
So I think the balance is the extra expense to preserve the public view. So that's something that definitely needs to get looked at. If you want to develop the site and look at, yes, it can be done. If you move everything back, it can be done.
Both expense
But it costs more
and the
money.
slope though, and the slope, like protecting the slope more than anything as well. Like you shoot any caissons down, it could negatively impact the slope.
So if I was you guys, I'd want to see some sort of study that verified that.
If I may, we have access to a whole study, and I know that this is not about that, but an old study of the land that was from, I believe, 2015, that said that the ground had never been used for development, so they were going to have to go dig down 4 feet anyway and recompact all the dirt just to be able to build on it. And so there's going to be some of that going on anyway. I don't think the slope at the back of the property, which is the same as the slope at the back of ours, is that dramatic that if you moved it back 9 feet, I'm not an architect or a builder, but I don't know if it would require caissons. And last of all, it's not about protecting the view, it's about the impact of that mass, and that mass of a building in that position just is not.
Okay.
And I do
Thank you.
have Henry who just wants to make a couple of comments if you allow it.
Henry Lenny himself?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure we welcome that.
Henry, you're on. My phone's going to die soon, but you're on with the Design Review Committee. So keep it brief.
Yes, very brief.
turn up the
Thank you
slides,
so
it goes.
much. I just want to clarify some things, basically dealing with 2 historic structures. The idea of mitigating the size, bulk, and scale with landscaping is unacceptable. It just doesn't work. Now, I believe that the building that is being proposed is very elegant, it's very well thought, and so on and so forth. But the aspect of being compatible to the 2 adjacent historic buildings, it's flawed. There are architects, even from the 1930s and the late 1920s, like Irvin Gill, Beltram, Goodhue, and Underhill. Beltram Goodhue, which used to have a home here in Santa Barbara, and I was fortunate enough and terrified of working on that home because the new owners wanted to make some changes. We came up with a solution. But Beltram Goodhue had the ability to create and deal with the views, the orientation, the sun, but he still he adhered to the basic principles of architecture. And what is that? Basic principles of architecture, whether you're dealing with a very, very modern building or basically a traditional building and something that is compatible. The issue that I have, and I respectfully disagree with the applicants, is that the building that is being proposed is compatible to the two historic buildings. Now, one thing that I thought would be very, very useful is that the applicant provided some three-dimensional electronic drawings showing the Goldsmith House and but it did not show the two-story Spanish Colonial Revival house by Paul Williams. One would be very interested for us to make a coherent judgment of the size, bulk, and scale is to add the Paul Williams building and basically compare them, the three of them, and then it can give the community, it can give us, the designers and consultants, an idea of the issue of size, bulk, and scale. Now, my last statement is if my life depended on it, I could not modify the building to make it fit. And I was fortunate enough to work with Luis Barragan, who one of the great modernists, the father of minimalism in Mexico, and his partner Andres Casillas. And there is no question in my mind that anyone that visits any one of those buildings, even though they're contemporary, that they're not relating to Mexican architecture. Now we can have the bright colors and so on and so forth here, but there are ways of mitigating this by providing a very simple form of architecture that achieves all the goals, with the exception of the noise and so on and so forth, without compromising the view. And I understand the view is extremely important for any community. So those are the input that I have. I'll be very, again, I'm trying to be proactive. As those of you who know me know that I am not an obstructionist, and I don't ever want to be that. I want to be able to collaborate with the applicant, the city, but it's an issue of policy. So if you have any questions, I'd be delighted to answer them.
Thank you for your input.
Hello, Henry. This is Bart Crandall. We've known each other for a while now.
Yes.
Just want to thank you for your comments, and I think you made a good point about it's a matter of policy. And this discussion should be actually at a different level to get the policy started. But, thank you again for your input again.
It's my pleasure. Thank you all for the talk.
Thanks, Henry. We'll talk soon.
Okay, I think we've heard from everyone. Thanks for your comments. Some great points were made. And so, just so the applicant's aware, we're just 3 members of the Planning Commission. There's 4 others. So whatever recommendations we make, that still would need to be approved by the Planning Commission as a whole. Our recommendations do carry some weight, but just so you're aware, this is not any sort of an approval. And, our goal here is to, we're representing the city, and we're concerned about just the quality of, let's say, the overall environment in the city. And as Bart mentioned, we are to follow the policies of the city. And in this case, that's why I want to be clear in the beginning, what is it that we're looking at? Why this particular house is so controversial. I mean, we don't get this many people for all of our meetings, obviously. And I think there's a lot of good points brought up, and we're going to have a discussion here. And primarily having to do with, I don't think we have the tools to really properly evaluate this. I don't know if you guys agree, but
That's what my comment was earlier.
yeah, it's that's right. You did say that. Somebody smart said that. So I would like you to consider giving us some exhibits that really put this project in context. And it's difficult because you've got slopes that you're dealing with. You have slopes not only on the street, but you have them on the site. And so, I don't, and you guys can chime in, I don't think we're in a position to really make any sort of like recommendations that if you use this different material or if you shifted this or made this minor adjustment, that it would be something that we could recommend. I think that, I'll let you go here in a second. I think coming back to us with more exhibits and really making the case for how you're compatible with these other two projects, these other two buildings, considering the nature of that part of the community. And this is what you did was helpful for sure. The collage was kind of a cool idea, but I think it was inadequate for what we need, to really make a decision. And also listen to some of the comments, some really good comments that were made by the public that I think should help to direct you. One thing I saw when I was looking at this, and I understand it's just a two-dimensional view, is that the line that you had, I don't remember which sheet it was. Anyway, the view angle.
It went on the screen.
No, there was one that had it did have the two structures on either side.
The aerial view?
That was an aerial view, but it showed, it was the only one I saw that had, nope.
There's a subcommittee in our presentation.
Oh, here it is. There's no sheet number, but it's a site planning study. Keep going. Right there. Okay, so that's the only one I saw that actually showed all three structures. And you can clearly see on that image that, let's just say you drew a line between the two historic homes on the most prominent point, that you're well in front of that. You're well in front of that. And so that
Also note
alone.
the mass, though, just also note the mass. This isn't a big house relative to the two.
I understand. It's a two-dimensional drawing, and there's a lot of slopes that come into play. But it seems to me that this is an important angle right here. And you're pretty far in front of that. And, it is a corner, I know, and this is a two-dimensional drawing. But that alone told me, it's going to be a lot more prominent than the two houses on either side from a contextual standpoint. Did you have something you wanted to?
Just real quick, I went through the process with the previous submittals. And we spent an enormous amount of time, we didn't call it a view corridor, we just called it a view of the building. But I would be hard pressed to not require the setback that we had on those previous ones. Because you don't really want to be looking at your building and just seeing a peekaboo of that corner of the Goldschmidt house. It needs to be pulled back so the Goldschmidt house isn't hunkered behind yours. So by pulling it back, that would certainly help.
That was an extra 9 feet? No, it was 54?
It was a fair amount, yeah. And also, we pulled the line from at least the property line, property corner. And wanted to make sure you didn't have to look at the corner of your house and the corner of that one to get that peak of view. As you go down, they're hidden. And we walked it, and in plan view, it looks like it's blocking it. In reality, not so much, especially if you're driving a car. If you're walking, it's a whole different experience. And I would say, at a minimum, one thing that I would hold to is getting that pulled back. I don't know why the garage the garage could be pulled forward a little bit, honestly. So some of your house would be tucked behind the garage, just to get some more buildable pad, but
Commissioner, question if I may, the original approved designs that you worked on, they were further back, were they 1 or 2 story?
one of them was 2-story.
One of them was 2.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember what the first one was, but I think the last one was 2-story.
2 story.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I would recommend, there you go, that's a 2-story.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good comments too about, the thing about these modern homes. They can be done very well, and then there's a lot of important details because you're sort of exposed. You're exposing, somebody talked about vent stacks, skylight flashing, skylights in general. All that stuff has to be sensitively dealt with to sort of downplay the modern. It's not necessarily the modernism, but it's all those details that you see that you don't normally see with a Spanish colonial revival or a more traditional home. So all that's going to have to come in, and I think that even if we give an approval or a recommendation for approval, we're going to point out a lot of that stuff that needs to be followed up with. So, I don't necessarily agree with Henry that you can't use landscape. I think it's going to be a combination of how the landscape connects to the neighbor, because you do see that's part of the experience.
He did say one poignant thing is, this is all focused at policy. We don't have the policies necessarily to do everything we'd like to see, or the public would like to see. We've got to live within the scope that we're given. So it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, and we're not really looking at the size of the house. We don't care if you do 6,000, it seems big, but it's really how the house sits on that property. That's the key. And a lot of times you can use grade, which doesn't seem like you did. You can use grade to sort of nestle the house, so it sits better on the property. But in terms of the style of architecture, as far as I know, I agree the most compatible would be to do a traditional home, but that's not dictated here, and I don't think our policy requires.
The one thing that this does that none of the others did is being an all-glass second story. I think the owner mentioned you can see the Goldschmidt house from down at the hardware store.
Correct.
Well, at night, you're going to see this massive glow and a little tiny, it's going to minimize that arch. I mean, is that something we can say yes or no to? Probably we can comment on it.
Well, one thing you can do is you can do deep setbacks of the glass area.
That helps.
So that it's not right out on the front like you have it shown. Stuff like that, I think it's just the sensitivity of the massing, the siting, incorporating, looking at the property, even the existing topo, and trying to fit it in. It does, it's kind of, I mean, it's a strong design, but it's kind of saying, look at me, you know, and that's sort of the opposite of what we're hearing from the neighbors, from the community.
If light pollution is a consideration, what about the lighted pickleball court that's being proposed in terms of
I don't even
noise?
play pickleball, guys. It's a sport court. Okay, it's a sport. I don't even play pickleball. It's a sport court.
Sport court.
It's a basketball court with a small tennis court on it. Okay, I don't even play pickleball. All right, can you play pickleball on it? Sure, but let's not get carried away here.
That's
Well, it was
a building department issue of
Close to my
string
master
lights
bedroom,
and.
I have some skin in the game.
I would just say a couple things. This is not a new dynamic, this room. It happens frequently. And I've only been on this like a year and a half. So, you know, what I want to share with you is what I like to say to people is what I've learned is, you know, HOAs kind of serve a function, and unfortunately, you guys don't have an HOA, right? And I feel kind of sometimes we're substituting a little bit for that. There's quite a bit of compromise here. We don't recommend you do this at the Planning Commission because it's pretty binary there. Here's the discussion and the learning and the perspectives and all of that is here. And we come together as neighbors here. And therefore, the idea of win-lose is not the concept. It's the how do we move forward as neighbors, live together, walk up and, you know, cohabitate together. This is the thing I try and emphasize as these proceedings, policy, this, that, you know, last guy said, well, I'll meet the zoning code. Okay, we're trying to make it work. And I will give you this, just as the policy part, where it does say every proposal should demonstrate that it has considered the contextual influences of neighboring properties as have made diligent effort to orchestrate careful relationships between old and new. I get that you've said that. I'm gonna come back to that in a second, but it continues and I'll give you this. Drawings, models, other graphic communications presented to the city should show neighboring buildings and important features of adjacent sites. Existing features should be shown in sufficient detail to enable evaluation of relationships of the proposed development and context. That's why I said what I said at the very beginning. I can't do that. I cannot form an opinion with what you provided. It's perspective views of the proposed project and its immediate neighbors as seen from street, sidewalk, or other public place should be provided. So that's why I think we need to ask you to come back. What I would say this, because I'm not an architect, but I'm just a homeowner, right? I live where it's on a slope too. And retaining walls are a concept that can enable you to provide protection from the flow of the land, of the slope, and you know, with all the rain and everything. And these guys will tell you, I bore them to death on Planning Commission with all the bluffs and blah blah blah. But you guys have the opportunity to control, right? You can put an excavator in there, right? You can do a lot with drainage, and I would tell you, you need to think about that because San Clemente is on a hill. It all drains downhill. You guys are going to get it. If you got to protect yourself, and in so doing, and this is common sense, but I'm trying to make an idea palatable, right? It's in your interest to think about the drainage and a retaining wall to protect your property from over time. We've seen it. It's all over town, so I don't need to tell you, right? If you do that right, you could harvest more of your lot as usable space with the retaining wall and with the done right with an excavator, so that you could push your house back. You can push it back. You can get more setback from the front and have the relationship that you want to your own backyard. You can still get all that. You might have to do some trade-offs back there, but I think you can accommodate the concerns that you're hearing. At the same time, you're protecting your own property with some kind of retaining structure and really thinking about the drainage. That way you don't have to compromise your design, you don't have to change your design, you don't have to pay this guy to redo everything. You just push the thing back. You could maybe look at altering some of your angles and some of the way that it does sit and to with respect to their adjacency. But that would be my, just right off the top. Look at your slope, look at how you could carve it, look at how you could reinforce it with a good retaining wall, and see how much space that harvests, and then go, well gosh, I could shift this back 12 feet or 10 feet. And then that changes the whole dynamic of it. Then you can even do more screening with landscaping, and you're completely out of the way. And that would just be my only perspective. So I'll give you this.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
We don't normally like to ask people come back, actually, so you know. That's kind of our thing. We want to be one and done and go on your way, give you our thoughts and do what you want. But I think, I don't know how you guys feel, but I just don't know that I can say more than, I mean, if you guys want to go to the Planning Commission, that's up to you. If you want to come back to get our advice with another round, that's up to you. But I think you're kind of getting a preview of what the binary conversation gets to. I mean, leave it up to, is that okay to leave it like that? I don't know.
Well, I think, basically what we're saying is, there's some tools that you can use. You didn't convince, certainly anybody in this room, other than, us, and I don't think you convinced us either, that you're being sensitive and compatible at this location. That's why in the beginning we talked so much about what is it that we're really looking at here. And so I think it should be clear to you now that, you need to add a little more work in terms of your presentation and how you fit here, And statements like, we just want to be the exact opposite, that probably doesn't help. I don't know. But it's a statement, right? But I don't think it helped you much in this case. It's more focusing on how we are fitting in.
It's compatibility relationship. The design that you have here, we're not talking about it. And in some ways I could compliment it, it looks nice and all that. That's not even the point. It's the site, situation, and the interaction and the interface and how it relates. And if you can push it back and still retain your design and all that, and it addresses all this, cool, we're done.
Are you guys comfortable that we've given you some helpful feedback?
Okay.
And I will say one thing. We're not recommending retaining walls.
No.
It's just a tool if you choose to use it.
That's right.
We're not
recommending anything other than...
Well, you see the retaining wall, I'm just trying to understand, are you talking about towards the Goldschmidt house, or are you talking about the retaining wall, retaining soil and flattening that back area?
Straight back.
Okay, yeah, so that is a retaining wall right at the back. So right now it's flat land to those two terraced retaining walls.
So you have, what is this?
The idea
all
is
just
that
landscaping then?
Idea that's all lawn space.
Right. So that's why I said at the very beginning,
Putting
all neighbors here, sometimes we have to make compromises.
Yeah.
Right? Shift the lawn to the front. That's a compromise.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say to you guys. Compromise. Find a way to meet in the middle.
just provide some graphic tools
Yeah.
to sell what you've done, run it flat, so people who aren't used to looking at drawings can get the relationship.
Okay, yeah, that's, we'll definitely take that, so thank you.
We're not suggesting story poles either. I think there's good graphic tools nowadays that you can, but it needs to be, in this case, almost as important to see the neighbors as it is to see your house. You know, you get that, right? Okay. Thanks, everybody, for your.
Thank you for your time, I appreciate it, and I think the contextual analysis will.
Thank everybody for getting involved.
Yeah, thanks for coming out and participating in the process.
Okay. I think we're about ready to go take our brides out to dinner or do something.
Oh, yeah. It is Valentine's Day.
I don't know what happened to my notebook.
We have it. We got lost in transition between.
Great, because I was just going to say, I didn't.
Apologies for the loose stuff.
It's okay. I didn't lose it.
Not you.
Okay, I think we don't have anything else. Is there any? There's no oral or written.
Nope.
Okay. Does anybody want to make a motion to
I'll make a
adjourn?
motion to adjourn to the regular meeting of the design review subcommittee
Second.
Wednesday, February 8th, 3 p.m.
I'm an architect.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Got everybody right now.
Hey, Jonathan, this is coming up a lot quicker than I thought.
You want to?
Yes. So I'm still getting myself like situated here. So part of that is because David will be rolling on in March, and then there's going to be a space of time. So the goal is for him to wrap up his report since he's.
Will they be done with all the studies?
Thank you so much for the time. They should be. So
I'm
they.
jealous.
I know that David.
I do.
And the city manager said we're
Haven't in a
sign
while. My wife had some surgery.
the contracts for the last historic peer review, etc. So they have timelines in place for that to be done around, but it's going to be around this time. So that it's not going to be done during the staff, like the internal DMT cyclical process.
Yeah, because it hasn't been to DMT yet, has it?
No. So it goes to DMT multiple times.
Yeah.
So
wouldn't have to go again after they come back with some of this
no.
stuff?
So
Or
for instance, like if they're
does
like
DMT
this,
think they're done with it?
I think, and I'll need to talk to Dave about this. I think that broadly the DMT component is done.
Thank you for your comments.
Can I meet you?
We're amateurs. You guys are the pros. We're just trying to learn.
We're just residents.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yes,
We're volunteer. We're volunteer.
Couple months in, and chances I heard
Our goal is to make this work.
Yeah.
Block and say no.
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
which design review, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know Chris is working on that.
Love the spirit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, just so figured get a feel for it. Great. Right.
So, you know.
Yeah. We don't normally have this much public engagement. I think you'll still get some of it.
Probably have some.
Yes. Yeah.
We expect that.
Okay. And I'm back. So I'll be reviewing the reports. I may not be in person at that meeting though. So
It's always good to see you.
yeah, definitely. Thanks
Welcome
for
back.
saying hi again.
Absolutely. All right. See you soon.
Doing it so the last 100.
Is DMT done with it?
I think that they're largely done with it. So that the historic resource report comes back, that's really just going to be.
Yeah, but what about the soils and the slope and all of that?
Yeah, so they will have.
No. I just want to introduce myself. I'm Bosco.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm actually really impressed at how much collaborative deliberations you guys do.
Anyway. Oh, good. You're welcome. Boss, right?
What's that? Bosco.
Bosco. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you again for
So I mean,
That's the flack I'm getting from the community.
yeah.
I got a call. Hey, really? In March, without soils and,
And you live here.
you know,
I missed.
sorry, Zach, you know, saying, yeah, well, that'll be fine, engineering's good, and go ahead and excavate that parking lot, no problem on the slope, and, that's on a coastal bluff. We're gonna, really?
Yeah. Well, one, it's not a coastal bluff. Like I know that that's a comment that gets made.
Yes.
But it's not a coastal bluff. Like that's by policy, that's not a coastal bluff. And the reality, us being frank, if we start to say like, you know, well,
That's why I waited till that person called me left.
Yeah. It's only one lot in, or it's only two lots in on coastal bluff. We're already in a situation with another project that already is being mandated to be 80 feet on because they are bluff setback lots. And there's substantial reduction in the viability of development on properties that are coastal bluffs. And if we start identifying that properties inland of those lots are also subject to those same limitations, and give coastal staff then the purview to start really subjectively identifying what those setbacks should be. Yes, there's some merit to it, but there's also.
Will we require as a part of our review, or is it subsequent to our review that we would have a condition that says you must
It'll be-
you shall get all these soil engineers done to justify that you won't be destabilizing the slope with your excavation.
Yeah, the latter.
Okay.
So I still want to have their team and someone from our public works team be able to respond generally to those questions.
Yes.
But the technical review, during the entitlement process, and I totally get the concern from the public. I understand that, but the intent of the entitlement process is broadly, here's the concept of the development at this location. We don't see, same with these projects here, like that's a provable level of drawings.
Yeah.
We don't see structural calculations or like how is this beam attached to that beam. That gets done through the formal plan check process at a later date, and same with grading. And it's not just, so our internal staff oversees that, but oftentimes if there's specialties needed, then we're working with sub-consultants that review those. Obviously planning's not doing any of the geotechnical reviews. So I want to have someone that can respond to that in person, at least at...
Here's what I'm thinking, Jonathan. This is going to be dicey.
Yeah.
So to minimize the revolt.
Yeah.
And put it into a structure that I can manage and in the meeting.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking is maybe, and I can come by next week or later, 2 weeks, whenever you want. But if it's David's doing it, right?
Yep.
Can he parse it into, okay, these are the big 5 issues.
Yeah.
Historical, the soils and all that, the drainage, all that, the adjacencies. Then we have the architecture, then we have the density, then we have residential serving. If he could just box those up and then parse his presentation into those sections and say, I have 5 or I'm making up a number, 6 sections we're going to go over.
Yeah.
Here they all are.
Yeah.
Here's the overview, but now I'm going to go through section 1. I would like to pause it. Let's drain the swamp on that. All questions. Okay? You know there's going to be 5 more going. So, okay.
Are you thinking like commissioner questions?
Yes, yes.
Not necessarily pause it, get feedback from everyone. Okay.
Right. Then that way we go through it in a very orderly fashion. And then we're not, what I learned from the last meeting is I want to avoid bouncing.
Sure.
And also going off track. Like, I was like, even Bart, I felt like, you're off track, dude. We're not even looking at the CUP. We're just looking at this. So I was just thinking, oh, man, when I saw that, I'm like, holy cow.
Yes.
So I was thinking if David could then say, hey, I'll make up again, number 6 areas of, here's the overview. I got 6, I've drilled it down to 6 compartments or 6 topics.
Yeah.
I'm going to go through them one at a time. I'm going to pause between each one and I will help him. Okay, let's do questions on this section. Drain that. All questions on that. Okay, good. Now we've got 5 more. Okay, good. Okay, we've gone. And we're on, that's 2 more topics down. Stay on focus on here.
Yeah.
Great. And now we've gone through all. Does anyone have any other questions? Are we all good on this? Okay, great. David, thanks. Public comment.
Yeah.
Now
I think that's great. And
that way we're not herky-jerky and bouncing around.
And I'm definitely...
And then we look disorganized. We don't look professional.
Yeah.
I want to look like we have this under control.
Yeah.
Then that way the public will get a sense like, okay, they're doing their job. We got to let them do their job. And then, and maybe the part that we collaborate on is the policy. Like, these are the permits that you're granting. These are the criteria that you use. These are the findings that you make. So I can almost paint the picture. This is the box we're in. And if you want to reach outside that box, that's okay, but if you want to stay within, this is what the general plan, this is what the zone is, and these are the things that we're looking at, then we can I want to be able to do that in an orderly way and have David go, so that is that is a check. Staff is recommending this. It meets all these, like in each bucket. Okay, so at the end, overview, okay, I've got 5 buckets, here's bucket number 1, let me go over it with you, here are the details. Now, here's the code. Here's what we looked at. This is why we're saying this part's okay. Green check. I'll take back questions. Great. So then they can question what he said in the box and the fact, why is he recommending that? Why is that okay?
Yeah.
Next. And then we'll rinse and repeat until we get through all of those. So at the end of it, in effect, built the case
Yeah.
for your recommendation.
Yeah.
And we've orderly conducted the meeting, and then the public can follow it too.
Yeah.
But I don't want my commissioners going all, well, wait a minute now, what about this? And then someone interrupts and says, talking about the historical, and Bart wants to talk about this, and Dawn wants to talk about that, and then I've lost control of the meeting. And so that's just what I was thinking.
I think that's a great approach.
Okay.
So yes, I'm thinking that a meeting would be good, would be helpful to think through, because he'll be best suited, better than you and I at this point to say like,
David,
like,
these are the boxes.
Here's probably the 5 boxes that I
Yes.
think make sense, so we can talk through that. And
Yeah.
I think this is going to be one of those ones that
I almost want to iterate with him on his presentation behind the scenes,
Yeah.
so that when he's presenting it, he's comfortable, uncomfortable. I know exactly where we're going,
where we're pausing and moving forward.
and I can put myself in the shoes of everybody else and try and shoot holes in it in advance.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, can you beef that up? Hey, can you clarify that?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of just coaching.
Yeah.
And then when he does it, it's going to hopefully go smoother.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, you and I know there's still going to be people.
Oh yeah, people are going to hate this.
It is what it is.
They're going to say no.
But I think, to your point, doing it in that way shows that there are, like, starting at the highest level, there's policies.
Yes.
And this project meets those policies, and it's not really like staff or the planning commission to reopen the world of policies. We're evaluating, A, does it meet the policies? Yes. B, does it meet the policies? Yes. C, does it meet it?
Yeah.
Yes. And if we see that there's areas that it doesn't,
Right.
then either then it's a project that gets continued, and maybe in this case it's something. This might be one of those projects that goes through more than one public hearing. I personally don't like continuations.
Yeah.
For the sake of just it takes a lot more time, and then you reopen the same public comments
And you
again.
have to start over again. I'd rather almost limit this to the only item on the agenda and spend 3 hours on it if we have to.
And in that case that we do, I think the goal would be, okay, we're all in agreement. Box A through D are good. Yes. Okay. E needs some work. So if we'll continue it, and the continuance will focus only on E.
Yep, 100%. The reason why I want to really drill the policy down is because when I want to look out to the audience. I want Wayne to hear that's the policy. Because, dude, you are part of all these policies, and if you want to come in and say, "Well, I don't like it,"
I know.
That's on you for not making a policy that matches what you don't like,
or just not being in the majority of. Again, it's not I was a council member and this is what I want. It was the council set this policy.
Right.
Like no one person is the council, and until the majority of the council sets a different policy, that's the policy.
And they made policies on that site specifically.
Yes.
And they made it visitor-specific serving. That, to me, that's the number one thing. And that's the pivot that I want to make crystal clear, almost to the point like, because this was added by the city council on this date and the general plan, we now are under these set of rules for this site specifically, so that there's a nexus between what's happening and that decision back then. We didn't make that decision.
Yep.
That was made back then. Well, I don't think Wayne was on it then.
And it might be good for David not to linger on this, but to also identify, like, broad scale, the prior approval. Like, there was a prior approval. The city previously approved a development at this site that was much more intense, but residential only. And then Coastal Commission denied that, and as a result, moving down the line, the city and Coastal Commission both agreed that this property would be zoned for visitor serving uses, so that any future, opportunity of development would move it in that direction of being a more visitor serving use.
Good. I think we're on the same page.
Okay. So could you maybe let me know about next Thursday, possibly?
I can tell you right now.
I feel like that might be my best opportunity.
Wide open. On the 22nd? Oh, wait a sec. 22nd. I've been going back and forth with Courtney on something. Let me just make sure let me just check that real quick. Okay. 22nd at 3, I have a meeting with Enmeyer and Cabral at 3 on the 22nd. Other than
Okay.
that, I'm open.
Do you want to do either 2 or 4, like on either
Yeah.
end of that, just so
Yeah.
you're already here? Do you
Yeah,
have a
that'd
preference?
be perfect. Yeah, maybe 2 would be good.
Okay.
Okay, I'll put that down. Yeah, it's already set up. 3 to 4, yeah. We'll be on the 3rd floor, so, okay.
Okay, I'll send a formal invitation. I'm just going to put a placeholder on my
Yeah, thank you.
phone.
I hope you don't mind me being prescriptive about.
No, and especially not on one like this. Like, I think that we need to have good strategy.
Yes.
For projects that we know are going to be.
I just want to
controversial.
collaborate with staff and just be, make sure the process is really.
And to your point, there should be no awkward silences.
Right.
There should be no good strategy.
Yes.
For projects that we know are going to be.
I just want to
controversial.
collaborate with staff and just be, make sure the process is really.
And to your point, there should be no awkward silences.
Right.
There should be no times where it's like, oh well, we don't have an answer for that.
No.
Then
yeah.
we're not ready for the public hearing.
Right.
Or if we have those moments, and so I think that having your eyes on, in this case, on like the draft presentation and kind of talking through that will both better prepare you to manage the meeting and also give an opportunity to like shoot some holes in.
Yeah.
David, I don't know that this is
Right.
answered for me yet.
Yes.
So
I just want us to be professional and the public walks away going, okay, I don't like what happened, but I understood what happened.
Mhm.
And I see where I understand what happened. Yeah, and I don't maybe like it, but then they're like, maybe I see the problem here. That policy bit us in the butt now.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, we'll do that and go from there. Anything else on your radar?